Yeah, hi there. In this quick lab, we are going to cover the quick lab GSP007. This is about setting up network and HTTP load balancers. So let's start with it. I'm going to start the lab. It's going to cost me, let's see how many credits, 5 credits. Let's go ahead. Okay, I got the details. Now I'm going to open the console in incognito mode and I'm going to connect using the credentials which are listed here. Let's quickly connect it. Okay, so GCP platform console is launched. Now what I'm going to do is open this activate cloud shell. So this is to launch the cloud shell. I'm going to click on this button. This is so I can open cloud shell in a new window. I'll close this window. Let's wait for this window to open up. Okay, let's quickly change the settings, make it to medium, the cloud auth list. Let's authorize it. So this is basically now following up the instructions as given in the lab. So this is done. Now let's check out whether the project I'm connected to is correct or not. Project is not there, so I have to set it up. Gcloud config set project, and then I have to specify the project ID. This is the project ID. Project is set up. Let's quickly check it out. Yep, I can see the project now. Now we'll set up the default regions and the default zone. So let's set up using the command gcloud config set compute zone and gcloud config set compute region to US Central 1A and US Central 1. So that's our zone and default region. Now we'll start with creating the network load balancers. For this, we will create three uh, VM instances. Each of these VM instance will be having a network tag attached to it, basically a tag attached to it. And then there will be a startup script specified which will be installing Apache 2 as soon as the VM comes up. So let's quickly create these VMs. So I executed these commands and created the three VMs. And so just to quickly check it, gcloud compute list instances. So oh, it's like other way around. Gcloud compute instances and list is in the end. So these are the three virtual machines, WW1, 2, and 3, which have been created. Now we're going to create a firewall rule, which will basically allow the external traffic to connect to these VM instances. So gcloud compute firewall rules. This is the firewall rule that we are going to create it, and it is attached to the same tag, network LB tag. Now firewall rule is created. What we can do is if we go to this and quickly check out the compute engine VM instances, we will see these three VMs which we created just now. And if we copy this external IP address and if we go to browser and type the external IP address, we are going to see the name of the VM machine because we have set up the firewall rule which is allowing the external connectivity. Okay, now what we have to do now is move towards the load balancing part. So this is done. So now let's move to the configuring the load balancing part. So we have to first create a external IP address for the load balancer. So let's create an external IP address for the load balancer. I'm going to Cloud Shell. Let's clear the screen, and the Cloud Shell is we have to we're creating the static IP address for the load balancer. So this is created, and we are creating another resource which is HTTP health check. That is fine. Now we have to create a target pool. So target pool is created now, and now in this target pool we have to add the instances that we created earlier. That is ww1, ww2, and ww3. Those instances we are adding to this target pool. Now we have to create a forward rule. This forward rule is basically, so whenever the static load balancer IP address is specified, it will be targeted to this target pool, and which in turn will um, target to one of the three VMs that we had created. So now if we now we have to find out the IP address of the static IP that we had created. So this is the IP address. That is fine. Now we have to run this command. The only thing that we need to do in this command is we need to just replace IP address with this IP address that we got, and let's run it. And in the output we should see reply sometimes from one of the three VMs. So if you see ww3 to 1123, so it means the traffic is getting load balanced between these among these three VMs. So I think this is done. So let's Control C. Okay, so this is done. This testing is done. Now we'll move towards the HTTP load balancer part. Okay, so for HTTP load balancer, the first step is to create the load balancer template. So I'm just copying the code as it is from the lab and executing it. So this will create an instance template. So template is created. Now using this template, we are going to create a managed instance group. So let's create a managed instance group using this backend template that we created. Okay, now, so if you see, this is the manage instance group got created, and it is having the target size of 2, and the template being used is LB backend template. Okay, now we have to create a firewall rule. So let's copy this. Let's clean this screen and create the firewall rule. Once this is done, we will move to create a static external IP address. Okay, and now we have to get the, the actual value of this static IP address. It is this. Okay, now let's create a health check for the load balancer. This is creating a health check for the load balancer. HTTP health check. Now we are going to create a backend service. The backend service is created. Now we need to add the instance group to this backend service. So the manage instance group that we created earlier, that we have to attach to this backend service. Now we need to create a URL map to route the incoming request to this default backend service. So any incoming request that is there, it should be routed to this backend service. So for this, we have to create a URL map. So let's quickly clear the screen, and we are going to create a URL map. Now we have to create a proxy, HTTP proxy. So whatever request is coming via this proxy, we need to route it to URL map. Now we have to create a global forwarding rule so that incoming requests are routed to the proxy. So if you see, what we have done is we are creating the rules to route the incoming requests to this proxy. Proxy is routing it to URL map. URL map is routing it to the backend, and backend is connected to the managed instance group. Now we can check the progress. Let's see if it works out or not. Looks like it is still taking some time. That is fine. Now let's test your traffic to send your instances. So what we have to do now, from the navigation menu, go to the network services and load balancing. So we go to navigation menu, network services, and load balancing. Just following the click on the load balancer that you just created, which is web map HTTP. This is the load balancer that we created. In the backend section, click on the name of the backend and confirm that the VMs are healthy. So in the backend section, click on the backend. So in the backend, okay, we are seeing healthy 2 out of 2, so that is not a problem. Now, what they're saying is, when the VMs are healthy, then test the load balancer using the web browser. Go to http:/IP address, replacing IP address with the HTTP load balancer IP address. So I think in the console we have that IP address that we got. Okay, so to get the IP address, I'm just going to run the command again. So this is the command: gcloud compute address describe lb-ipv4-1. This is the static IP that we created. This is the value. So let's go to the page and type HTTP and this IP address. So we get this output: page served from backend group. So if we go to this lab, this is the expected output. So it means our HTTP load balancer is also working. Now we have got 50 out of 100. Let me check the other tasks, uh, which I didn't check earlier. So let me quickly just check it. So everything is done now, 100 out of 100. So we have completed both HTTP load balancer and network load balancer in this lab. Thank you. Let's end the lab.